The committee will come to order. Today we're considering two important nominations. Robert Santos to be Director of the Census Bureau within the Department of Commerce, and Sheriff Ed Gonzalez to be Assistant Secretary for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, commonly referred to as the Director for ICE within the Department of Homeland Security. Certainly welcome to both of you and to your family members joining us today, and congratulations on your nominations. And thank you for your willingness to take on these critical and incredibly important positions. The Census Bureau is the leading source of quality data about our nation's people and economy. The decennial census and the Bureau's surveys are critical for helping communities, businesses, and people across our nation ensure that they have the resources and information that they need in order to thrive. Mr. Santos, if confirmed, you will lead the Bureau as it completes the 2020 census, plans for 2030, and administers the Bureau's critical demographic and economic surveys in a changing nation. I know that you understand the importance of the Census Bureau mission and the challenges that it faces. As an expert in statistical research and survey design who has worked extensively with the Bureau, you know that stakeholders rely on the Census Bureau to produce data that is both reliable and accurate. You also know that transparency and accountability are essential for building and maintaining trust in the Bureau and its data. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your background and your vision for the Census Bureau. Sheriff Gonzalez, if confirmed, you will lead an agency with a vast public safety mandate. In addition to immigration enforcement responsibilities, ICE contains DHS's principal investigative entity, Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, which is charged with investigating transnational criminal activity that threatens the safety of our communities all across the United States. ICE's law enforcement professionals combat narcotics, smuggling, terrorist networks, human trafficking, financial crimes, and other threats to public safety. And as you know from your extensive law enforcement background, this is a vital and extraordinarily difficult task. ICE and its workforce face no shortage of both internal and external challenges. ICE has been without a Senate-confirmed director for 4.5 years. And this absence of stable leadership has made it even more difficult for ICE to effectively carry out its mission. ICE urgently needs a qualified, committed leader who will tackle the agency's challenges head-on. If confirmed, you will be responsible for rebuilding trust with ICE workforce, Congress, state and local partners, as well as other stakeholders. This means supporting and improving what is working, but also recognizing and correcting what is not working. From our earlier conversation, I know that you understand and are prepared for this very difficult work ahead, and I greatly appreciate your commitment to both accountability and transparency. I look forward to hearing more about your qualifications and plans to lead this critical agency. We'll normally now turn it over to Senator Portman, who is my ranking member. But as we discussed before the hearing, we've got a lot of things happening simultaneously. We're all double booked. Senator Portman is very engaged, I know, in some of the budget negotiations. He will be joining us shortly. But we will, when he arrives, he'll be making a statement or putting one into the record. So now it is the practice of this committee to swear in witnesses. So if you will please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. Our first nominee is Mr. Robert Santos, nominated to be the Director of the U.S. Census Bureau within the Department of Commerce. Mr. Santos is currently the Vice President and Chief Methodologist at the Urban Institute. He is a nationally recognized expert in survey sampling and survey design with over 40 years of experience in social science and policy research. After receiving his BA in mathematics from Trinity University in San Antonio and an MA in statistics from the University of Michigan, go Blue, Mr. Santos went on to hold several leadership roles, including Vice President of Statistics and Methodology at the University of Chicago's National Opinion Research Center, Director of Survey Operations at the University of Michigan, Survey Research Center, and partner and executive vice president at a Texas market research firm. Mr. Santos has also served as an expert advisor to the CDC and the Census Bureau. He currently serves as the elected president of the American Statistical Association, the leading professional organization for statisticians in the United States. Welcome, Mr. Santos. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to first introduce my wife, Adela, and my son, Emilio, who are here in support. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to give an opening statement. And thank you, committee members, for those of you who are here, and I understand if you can't be. I will begin. It's an honor, and I'm humbled to appear before you today as the nominee for the Director of the Census Bureau. I'd like to thank the President and Secretary Raimondo for the trust they have placed in me with this this nomination. Born and raised in the barrios of my native San Antonio, I was fortunate to be in a Mexican-American family whose parents secured civil servant jobs at Kelly Air Force Base. I was privileged to be educated by the Irish nuns at Little Flower Elementary School, and I was taught to be a responsible adult by the brothers at Holy Cross High School. The values instilled in me at these schools are foundational to my leadership. I'm a member of a Gold Star family. My brother Rene died in Vietnam in 1969 when I was a high school freshman. His death furnished the Section 8 deferment that I did not seek, and a pain that endures to this day. With this sacrifice to our country, I was free to attend San Antonio College, Trinity University, and then the University of Michigan to follow my dual passions of statistics and helping people. Those opportunities that I had allowed me to believe that I should pay it forward, and I tried to do that every day of my life. And if confirmed, it will be time to serve my country. I wouldn't be here today without the enduring support of my family. At age 18, I married my wife, Adela, and we've now been married 48 years. She's my most important source of support, counsel, and love. Our two children, Emilio and Clarissa, always support me and are constant sources of comfort and pride. And my two granddaughters, 9-year-old Renee and 3-year-old Layla, brighten my heart incessantly. My wife and I take great pride in having cared for them the last half of 2020 during the COVID pandemic, while my daughter finished nursing school in Arkansas and her husband, Chris, was deployed overseas with the Air Force. Now, I'm eager to serve as Census Bureau Director because I care deeply about this country and believe I can give back to a nation that has given so much to me. I understand the importance of data quality and the Census Bureau's role in providing data that nurtures our democracy, informs our people, and promotes our great economy. You see, Census Bureau data help weave us together to form a more perfect union. Although this is a political appointment, I am no politician. I'm a scientist, executive-level manager, a researcher, and a longtime supporter of the Census Bureau. In a 40-year career, I've held leadership positions in academic, nonprofit, and commercial research firms. I've conducted research for most federal agencies across many policy areas. I've held membership in scientific advisory committees from Census Bureau to CDC to national academies and others. I'm current president of the American Statistical Association, the world's largest association of statisticians. I was recently president of the American Association for Public Opinion Research. I've had the distinct honor of receiving the highest lifetime achievement awards from both organizations. I believe this body of work and recognition positions me well to lead the Bureau if confirmed. The Census Bureau needs a director who understands the critical role of providing quality data to our country. Society is in the midst of a technological renaissance, and the Census Bureau should leverage technological advances and innovate to create efficiency and effectiveness. If confirmed, I can set priorities and directions in this area. The Bureau also needs more transparency and independence to build public trust as it continues planning for the 2030 decennial census and completes delivering the 2020 census products. Career staff at the Census Bureau need recognition for the exceptional scientists that they are. The director must nurture a staff that has endured a tumultuous 2020. And finally, the director should cultivate lines of communication with stakeholders and with Congress. In closing, I'm incredibly grateful and humbled by the support I've received from the scientific community, my colleagues, my friends, and my family. If confirmed, I pledge to serve with humility, honor, and integrity. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. Our next nominee is Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, nominated to be the Assistant Secretary for Immigration and Customs Enforcement at the Department of Homeland Security, more commonly referred to as the Director of ICE. Mr. Gonzalez currently serves as the Sheriff of Harris County, Texas. It's the largest sheriff's office in the state of Texas and the third largest nationally. He began his law enforcement career as a civilian employee in the Houston Police Department, where he later became a police officer and rose to the rank of sergeant. He served on the elite hostage negotiation team and was assigned to the homicide division as an investigator. After serving 18 years with the Houston Police Department, Sheriff Gonzalez retired in 2009 to serve 3 terms on the Houston City Council. He was elected by his peers in 2010 to serve as Vice Mayor Pro Tem, helping to manage the workforce of the city of Houston. As Sheriff of Harris County and as a City Council member, Gonzalez has spearheaded innovative efforts to expand social services in order to reduce arrest, divert crime, and improve public safety. Welcome, Sheriff Gonzalez. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, distinguished members of this committee, I am honored to appear before you to discuss my nomination to lead U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. I want to thank President Biden for nominating me, Secretary Mayorkas for his confidence in me, and this committee for considering my nomination. I also want to express my love and gratitude to my parents, both hardworking children of immigrants. My father was a self-taught welder. He never finished school or learned how to read and write. He made up for it by outworking his competition, and he raised me to value education and hard work as the keys to achieving the American dream. My mother owned a modest beauty salon where she showed me the power of community, service to others, personal responsibility, and strong relationships. My parents taught me to love our country, not only for the land of opportunity that it is today, but also for what it aspires to be. My wife, Dr. Melissa Gonzalez, is a lifelong educator and administrator in academia. Her love and support have been my foundation throughout my career, and together we have built a family that includes our smart, strong, and talented daughters. America has shown the world that it's not only possible to survive, but thrive as a nation that welcomes those seeking a new home and a better life through hard, honest work. We have proven that people from varied backgrounds cannot just coexist, but rally around common values and a shared dream of always doing better. With that said, the American dream relies upon the rule of law and a functioning legal immigration system. I have been proud throughout my career as a law enforcement professional to uphold our nation's laws. If confirmed as ICE director, I will be responsible for 20,000 dedicated men and women who work every day to guard against threats to our national security, public safety, and safeguard the integrity of our borders. This includes ICE's critical investigative mission through HSI, as well as enforcement and removal operations carried out by ICE ERO. Theirs is a difficult and often thankless job, but leading such a team would be the honor of a lifetime. I chose a law enforcement career because I care deeply about the neighborhoods I grew up in, their people, the businesses, schools, and houses of worship. When you have such a love for your home, your community, and your country, you want to give back, and so I chose to protect and serve. I first started as a patrolman in the Houston Police Department, working my way up to the roles of homicide detective and hostage negotiator over nearly 2 decades. In each of these 2 roles, I have been privileged to keep our community safe from harm. In 2009, I took my next step in public service. I ran for the Houston City Council and went on to serve 3 terms representing my neighborhood. I also served as Houston's Mayor Pro Tem, a role that gave me the opportunity to help manage the operations of the country's 4th largest city. I championed proposals to equip our peace officers with the tools, training, and resources they needed to keep our community safe, while working to improve social services to address the root causes of many police calls. In 2016, the people of Harris County elected me to serve as their sheriff. The Harris County Sheriff's Office is the largest in Texas and the 3rd largest nationwide, with over 5,000 employees protecting 4.5 million residents within a 1,700 square mile area. In that role, I have been no stranger to serious challenges, leading our agency's hurricane rescue operations in 2017 and leading our office's efforts to manage the COVID-19 pandemic in our community and in our jail system since 2020. As sheriff, I have partnered with ICE, the FBI, DEA, U.S. Marshal Service, U.S. Attorney's Office, and other federal agencies in order to investigate and prosecute crimes that span multiple jurisdictions and counties and countries. If confirmed as ICE director, I look forward to building on these partnerships to make our community safer while working closely with communities to ensure ICE is able to carry out its mission. If confirmed, I look forward to working with this committee under the direction of Secretary Mayorkas in pursuit of these missions while upholding the highest principles of law enforcement public service. I pledge to keep communication open and to respect your oversight and guidance. Thank you again for considering my nomination. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Ranking Member Portman, you are recognized for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Mr. Santos and Sheriff Gonzalez for your willingness to serve and for your statements today. The Census Bureau, Mr. Santos, as you know, provides a critically important service to our nation, and you talked about that in your opening statement. Census data supports activities all around the country. Businesses, nonprofits use census data for planning. State and local governments use census data to make spending decisions. The federal government distributes more than $1 trillion a year based on census data, so we've got to get it right. And then, of course, census data supports the redistricting process, which is an essential part of our nation's democracy, and it is especially timely the Census Bureau be more responsive with regard to this responsibility. The current delay in providing census data for redistricting has negatively impacted a number of states in this country, and one of them is Ohio, that I represent. We're very concerned about that because we're trying to move forward with the redistricting process, but we need to have the data. I've been assured by the Census Bureau that they have now agreed to provide redistricting data to Ohio by August 16th. We cannot let that date slip. The Census Bureau must meet that deadline. Mr. Santos, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this issue as well as your views on the many other challenges facing the Census Bureau. Sheriff Gonzalez, you and I discussed yesterday, the Director of ICE position is very important for a critical agency and deserves careful consideration by this committee, which has oversight over Department of Homeland Security. It's particularly important today because by any measure, we have the worst crisis at our southern border that we've had in at least 2 decades. The numbers are overwhelming. In May, more than 180,000 migrants were encountered at our southern border. June looks to be even higher from the preliminary data that we've been able to hear about. The number of migrants apprehended at the border has risen every single month since President Biden took office. And we are told that more than 90% of those migrants are crossing unlawfully and dangerously, often, between our ports of entry. Border Patrol agents also estimate, but generally do not report monthly, the number of migrants who evaded apprehension. I think they refer to people as those who got away. This is a conservative estimate that likely undercounts the true numbers. But we are now seeing record estimates of those not apprehended at the southern border, those who got away. In March and April of this year, the Border Patrol estimates 70,000 migrants evaded apprehension by its agents. We don't know who these people are. I traveled to the southern border earlier this year. I was in El Paso, where I have been before. I watched families who were enrolled in the Migrant Protection Protocol as one example, the MPP program. And these were families who were in Mexico pending the adjudication of their asylum claim. Under the new administration, they were brought into the United States. I saw it. They were released into the country, and an ICE officer personally described to me what the parole process is like that I witnessed in real time. Instead of giving these individuals a court date and saying, you know, your asylum claim is being adjudicated, you need to show up at court at this time, at this place, what they said was, we're giving them a piece of paper, and I saw the piece of paper. And the piece of paper simply had ICE offices listed on the back. And I said, well, how do they know which ICE office to go to? And the answer was, we don't know where they're going, and we're not suggesting where they go or certainly telling them where they go. They can go wherever they want in the United States, and we're just giving them these offices so that when they end up where they end up, they'll hopefully have an ICE office near them that they can go to. I was shocked because I was told that people were given a court date and told to go to the court, but that's not what's happening. So, you know, I talked about this, but I just think our system is broken and we've got to fix it. Otherwise, we'll continue to be a pull factor. I was just in Ecuador, which, by the way, sends more migrants to our border than Honduras now. I was just in Guatemala, which, of course, is one of the 3 countries that has been traditionally sending the most women and children, unaccompanied kids in particular. El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And I heard the same thing, which is the leaders of this country don't want their young people going to the United States. They want them to stay there and build the future of that country. And they don't like the fact that we have a system in place that provides this pull where if you get to the border and claim asylum, you're allowed, in the vast majority of cases, some say all, but let's say the vast majority of cases, to simply come into the country. And if this is the protocol where you say you don't even have to show up for a court date because we're not even giving you one, we're not even telling you where to go, I just don't understand how the system's going to work. In 2019, we had a surge, and it was largely unaccompanied kids, as you recall, because you were on the border, and I know you understand this issue very well. But I'm told that ICE has returned virtually none of those unaccompanied kids, none of them. They're all still here. And so it's no wonder that the coyotes can go and exploit that situation and charge these families the kind of money that we can't even imagine because, you know, for them $10,000 is not just their whole life savings, it's a mortgage on their house, it's everything they have. And then, unfortunately, many of these young people and families are abused on the way to the border. It's a dangerous situation, even short of the desert crossing that's often dangerous in and of itself, as you well know. And so it's a system that's not serving anybody well right now. So I have very deep concerns about it, as you know. Anyway, I later checked in with ICE to ask them, by the way, where the migrants had gone who I had watched go through this process, who were told to check in with ICE. And ICE was unable to tell me exactly how many migrants had checked in with ICE to receive a court date. We've asked for this information repeatedly, and we've been told it's simply not available. So we don't know. As we all know, cooperation between our federal, state, and local law enforcement is critically important to keep our nation safe. In 2017, Sheriff Gonzalez, you made a decision to end the department's voluntary compliance program with ICE. This voluntary compliance and the cooperation, known as the 287G program, has helped remove a lot of dangerous criminals from our communities. You've also stated that you still allow ICE to work inside the county jail, but you have spoken out forcefully against Texas law that mandated cooperation with ICE. So I am concerned, as you know from our conversation, about whether it would be appropriate for you to lead an agency that you've been so critical of. Even if the border crisis ended tomorrow, you know, ICE is going to be dealing with the ramifications of this border crisis for many years to come. And as you have noted to me, a lot of people are coming to this country on visas and then overstaying their visas. So it's not just about the border, it's about ICE's broader responsibilities. As I've said many times, you know, we are a nation of immigrants, and we're proud of that. And we welcome immigrants to this country in a legal, proper manner, and we should. We are a generous country, and we should be. But we also have to have immigration laws that are clear, enforceable, and allow people to come here legally, properly, and in a humane way. Our committee looks forward to hearing from both of you, and thank you for, again, your willingness to serve.
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. There are three questions the committee asks of every nominee. I'm going to ask each of you to respond briefly with just a yes or no. We'll start with Mr. Santos and then Mr. Gonzalez. First, is there anything you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated?
No.
No.
Second, do you know of anything personal or otherwise that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
No.
No.
Lastly, do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Sheriff Gonzalez, if confirmed, you will lead a workforce that has suffered from low morale for several years now. More than 20,000 men and women serve throughout ICE, including many who face incredibly dangerous situations as they work each and every day to keep us all safe. Can you briefly discuss your experience involved in improving the morale as to a law enforcement leader through your extensive career in that capacity, and how you plan to engage the ICE workforce if confirmed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have experience in working with large workforces. First, in my role as a city council member and mayor pro tem, we're working alongside the mayor. We oversaw a workforce of more than 20,000 municipal employees in the city of Houston. Now, in my role as Harris County Sheriff, I work with 5,000 outstanding men and women that operate one of the largest jail systems in the country, as well as complex law enforcement operations, including a maritime unit, security in and around the Port of Houston, as well as investigative functions as well. I've always tried to approach any role coming in and working closely with the workforce. I think it's important to make sure that we're working collaboratively. I'm an inclusive leader. I believe in two-way communication. At times, we've been able to engage with our workforce to try to make sure that we're making some decisions that are popular with them, that may improve their work conditions. I care deeply for the team members that work with me. I commonly use that phrase, team member. And so I would use that experience if confirmed, to be ICE director, to come in, listen, to try to understand the work, understand what's working and where we could make things better. I'm a big believer in continuous improvement, and the morale of the ICE workforce is critical to making sure we successfully accomplish its mission.
Thank you. Mr. Santos, the Census Bureau and its workforce have faced many challenges, as you're well aware, in recent years, but particularly in 2020, including planning and executing for significant adjustments to the decennial census operations in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also as a result of attempted political influence in the census operations. If confirmed, how do you plan to engage with and support the Census Bureau's career workforce and ensure that its expertise that drives the Bureau's decision-making?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I highly value the career staff at the Census Bureau. They represent some of the best scientists in the country, some of the best operations people, and I understand the tumult that they underwent through operationalizing the 2020 census and responding to that. Many of them ended up working 7 days a week, possibly 80-hour weekdays. It's been harrowing, and these staff deserve to be recognized for the job that they did and rewarded for it. So I believe that there are things that can be done to understand the depth of stress that they have undergone through listening sessions, through other types of things, and then proceed to craft, with lessons learned from COVID, a better work environment for them. There are morale issues. We know that. Morale is a symptom. It's not the root cause of a problem. I would like to work with the census career staff and the staff themselves to understand what are the root causes of job satisfaction and job dissatisfaction. What can we do? There's typically the standard, we can give bonuses and raises and such, and that's very good, and that can be leveraged. But the benefit of those types of rewards really wears off quite quickly. It's more rewarding to provide individuals an opportunity to find an additional research path, or given COVID and the way that folks have learned how to actually work better at home, provide flexibility in terms of work at home, remote work, and things of that sort. So I would have work with senior census career staff to avail ourselves of a variety of personnel tools, work with HR to develop some packages and some approaches that, number one, understand the root cause of morale issues, and secondly, find ways to support folks for the long term so that they grow in their careers, they are satisfied, and they benefit the country as we want them to.
Thank you. Sheriff Gonzalez, as you know, ICE's law enforcement mission is extremely broad. And one critical piece of that is dealing with human trafficking. In fact, ICE's Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, is responsible for overseeing a wide effort within DHS to combat human trafficking. So my question to you is, can you tell us about your experience in this area and how you would approach HSI's work to combat human trafficking in this country?
Yes, Chairman. I do have vast experience in investigating human trafficking matters, human trafficking crimes. First, obviously, as a patrolman and later as an investigator, working many of these complex investigations over the years. I have direct experience of how these cases or these criminal networks operate, having arrested many throughout the years. In my role as City Council, as Chair of the Public Safety and Homeland Security, I worked very closely with then Mayor Anise Parker as we launched her first ever office dealing with human trafficking, and we elected a wonderful leader, Minal Patel Davis, that's still in place today, to really help formulate a plan for the city of Houston that was very holistic and really considered a lot of the interrelated factors. That's been a success, and that office remains today. Now, as Harris County Sheriff, we're often seen as a hub for human trafficking, so we place a lot of importance on this, making sure that we're working with the NGOs, that we're working with other law enforcement partners, both local, state, and federal as well, making sure that our enforcement action is not focused on the survivors, but instead on those that seek to take advantage of others. And so we work very closely, also collaboratively as well. We work on task forces with both the local police department, which is HPD, as well as with our district attorney's office with what's referred to as Project 180. And so we work very closely in a number of different angles to be able to tackle this issue. We know it's very complex. It has, these investigations take a long time, but we work very hard to try to dismantle this in our Houston area and region. We also work collaboratively when we do have a major scale event for which Houston is known, to make sure that we're also raising awareness in our communities as well. We've also worked closely with hotel operators to make sure that we're educating and raising awareness how many times individuals could be manipulated and what are some of the signs to see. And so we've led a very successful effort, and also commend the men and women of ICE, HSI, that have had great success in this area throughout the years. And I look forward to joining their efforts, learning what's being done and how we can continue to advance their work and use my experience to continue to seek continuous improvement in the area of human trafficking that is critically important, and we must put a stop to it.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Chair recognizes Senator Johnson for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gonzalez, it's July 15th, and we don't even know what the June apprehension numbers are from DHS, from CBP. It's a little disappointing. I believe DHS is utilizing Title 42, protecting us, our country, from COVID and returning people immediately, but I don't have those numbers either. I don't think we've got them for April, May, or June. So this committee is, to a certain extent, operating in the dark in terms of what is exactly happening. I think my first question for you, I asked this of Secretary Mayorkas. He has not honored his promise, but will you commit to this committee to be transparent and get us this information on a timely basis?
Absolutely, Senator Johnson. You, in your role here, Congress, and in your role here in this committee, provides a very critical oversight. If confirmed, I will make sure that we're working in a timely manner, providing you with the necessary information. It's important for you to be able to. Okay,
I'll hold you to that commitment. Now, I think the next point is, I don't believe we have any idea where the people that are being processed and dispersed. And let's face it, when the administration says they're fixing this problem, all they're doing is they're getting more efficient at processing and dispersing people to all points in America. And I don't think anybody knows where they're going. As Senator Portman was talking about, they get a list of ICE officers because they don't know where they're going. I think that's absurd. Do you agree with me that we have no idea where these people are going?
Senator, it is concerning to not have that information.
Do you think states and cities ought to be told when an airplane full or a busload of people that have come to this country illegally and are being dispersed by DHS, do you think they ought to be told when they're getting a batch of these individuals?
I think coordination with local, state partners is very important. That's something I've experienced with, and I think it is important to make sure we're communicating information with them and sharing it.
But we're not sharing that with any state or local government, are we?
I'm not in the role yet.
Well, when you were sheriff of Houston, did DHS tell you that, by the way, a busload's coming up from McAllen, we're going to terminate it and drop these people off in Houston? Were you ever told that?
No, sir.
How much experience did you have in Houston with gang activity?
I have a great deal of experience. I've worked on gang murders before that had obviously a gang nexus, as well as currently we operate in a number of different avenues to combat gang crime in our community.
Which were the prominent gangs in Houston that you dealt with?
We have some of the local ones like Tango Blast. It's known, the Bloods, the Crips, Southwest Cholos, MS-13. We have a variety, just like many other jurisdictions.
So under my chairmanship, we held a hearing on MS-13, and it was chilling, to say the least, the brutality of that gang. when we are apprehending 6,000 people a day, overwhelming CBP, that's opening up corridors for drugs, for gang members, for very unsavory individuals to, the gotaways. There's 6,000 apprehended, 1,000 known gotaways. We have no idea how many unknown gotaways. This is way more than a crisis, and it's continuing, by the way. What percent of the individuals do you believe are going to show up at an ICE office having been dispersed with just the address of a few ICE? I mean, do you think a high percentage of the 6,000 people a day, if we end Title 42, they're going to be dispersed? Do you think they'll show up in an ICE office?
If confirmed, I would want to understand what criteria CBP is using, what information they're gathering. Ultimately, they make those decisions on NTAs in comparison to NTRs. And so I would want to see what criteria and then what information is being utilized so we could work effectively so that we can keep an eye on the security of our homeland.
Again, we don't even know where they're going. So we don't know where they're going. We haven't given them a notice to appear. We just give them some, let's face it, very few, if any, are going to show up. So again, 6,000 people a day, no notice to appear, dispersed to all points of America, which we don't even know where they're going, and we're not providing any notice to state and local governments. That's what's happening. So let's talk about the unaccompanied children. I talked about gangs earlier. What we don't talk about very often is the fact that when we talk about unaccompanied children, I certainly think of 2- and 3-year-olds, right? We see all the pictures. The press always shows the pictures, at least during the last administration. But the fact is, 70% of those unaccompanied children are 15, 16, or 17 years old. They're not 2 and 3 years old. That's a very small percentage. Another fact is that 70% of them are male. So having experience with gangs, wouldn't you say a 15, 16, 17-year-old immigrant male would certainly fit the profile of somebody who might be in a gang or be recruited by a gang or be used by the drug traffickers to traffic their drugs, right? I mean, don't you find that in law enforcement? It's a minor that's trafficking the drugs because they don't get put away for dozens and dozens of years because they're a minor? Isn't that what's the reality of the situation is with this flood? We are letting in people that are potentially gang members. We are letting people that are going to be trafficking drugs or human trafficking. Isn't that your experience as Houston's sheriff?
I'm always mindful of not profiling and developing any stereotypes in my work, so I try to look at the facts.
That's not profiling.
No, but I'm saying at the end of the day, they're still teenagers. I know that if they're coming into our country, they're processed through CBP. There's different screenings that are done. And at the end of the day, they're still teens. And I think that HSI is a preeminent law enforcement agency when it comes to investigating how criminal networks are manipulating the immigration system to take advantage of these individuals. And I think it's important that we use our resources to combat and dismantle those criminal networks.
Mr. Gonzalez, you are engaging the same state of denial of reality that is happening under this administration with DHS and Secretary Mayorkas. And if you're denying the problem, we have no chance of fixing it whatsoever. This is a crisis that's not being addressed. It's a tragedy for this nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Chair recognizes Senator Hawley for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to both the nominees. Thank you for being here. Mr. Gonzalez, I'd like to start with you, if I could, and I'd like to start with a fundamental question that I've asked other nominees who've appeared before this committee. Do you believe that unauthorized entry at our borders should remain a crime?
Yes, sir.
Here's another fundamental question. Putting aside any resource constraints, whatever they may be, do you think that if an alien enters the country illegally, they should be subject to removal from the United States?
Yes.
Do you believe that individuals who currently have an order of removal should in fact be removed from the United States?
Yes.
If an illegal alien enters the country and is then convicted of a crime, do you believe they ought to be subject to removal?
Yes.
What about illegal aliens who've been convicted of things, let's say, assault, homicide, kidnapping, sex offenses, sexual assault, weapons offenses? Do these illegal aliens, should they be removed from the United States?
In my opinion, yes.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear all of that. I'm asking you because according to internal ICE documents that were released as part of a litigation ongoing between the states of Montana and Arizona, and the United States, the Biden administration's new limitations on enforcement could result in the release of convicted felons who are already in ICE custody, including 3,300 aliens who've committed assault crimes, 4,000 who've committed drug crimes, and hundreds who have been convicted of sex crimes. Let me just ask you, if you're confirmed to this position, do you plan to facilitate the release of these criminal illegal aliens from ICE custody?
Senator, in my view, the current guidance that is being offered would make those a priority. I think those are public safety priorities, and so I would make sure that we're working in accordance with that guidance that does permit for the removal of those individuals as a public safety threat.
Well, what the documents show, I mean, again, according to the lawsuit, the documents obtained as part of the lawsuit, is that under the current guidance, these aliens who are currently in ICE custody could well be released. What you're telling me here today, I'm asking you if you'll facilitate the release. I think you're saying no to me, but I just want to be sure about it. Are you saying no, that you will not facilitate the release of aliens who've committed assault crimes, drug crimes, sex crimes? Is that a no?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, will you facilitate the release of aliens who've committed sex crimes, assault crimes, other violent crimes?
If the premise of your question is that it's under some type of legal action that's taking place, I know that part of the guidance included that consideration that there is ongoing lawsuits and other things. I would work in accordance to the law with what I'm allowed to do, and if there's a court order that orders me to remove them. Otherwise, I would go with the guidance that we have, which allows me, if confirmed as ICE director, to be able to remove them. I see them as a threat. If it's under my authority, I would move to remove them.
So would you make it a priority? Let me ask it this way. Would
Yes.
you make it a priority to remove aliens who've been convicted of these crimes?
Yes, to me, those are serious crimes.
Okay. Would you agree with me that criminal illegal aliens who have, by definition, committed these crimes that we've been talking about, if they're released back into our communities, they are, at least some of them, are likely to be recidivists and to commit other crimes? I mean, I'm sure you've seen this in your own experience as sheriff. Would you agree with that premise?
Yes.
And therefore, it's important to remove them and actually make sure that they are not released to the public. Do you agree with that?
Yes, public safety is always my North Star.
Okay, with regard to the administration's recent decision to effectively end deportation of those aliens who entered illegally prior to November 1st, 2020, isn't this just a free pass for those who have entered, who arrived here over 6 months ago? I mean, I don't understand this. Give me your view. I mean, this sounds like a free pass to me. Isn't this a free pass for anybody who came before November 2020?
The ones that came before, in my understanding of the guidance that's been offered, doesn't preclude anyone still that's here unlawful to not be still removed. So I think that it's still there. I think it's just a matter of prioritizing key areas, and I think that it doesn't preclude anyone that's here unlawfully from being removed, in my opinion.
Okay, good. So you would be, I think you're telling me that you would attempt to enforce the law and to remove those who came to this country illegally in violation of our laws before November 1st, 2020. Is that correct?
Part of the role of ICE is to conduct enforcement operations. I think that those obviously have to be prioritized when we're considering limited operations and resources. I think that we do that every day. There's a lot of crimes on the books, but it's a matter of trade-offs. It's making sure that we're focusing on a strategic approach that goes after those individuals that do pose the greatest danger to the integrity of our border, public safety, and national security.
But here's my problem with the discussion about priorities. Since this administration has come to office, the number of ICE arrests has plunged. It has plunged. The Trump administration, I think, arrested over 6,000 people. 6,000 arrests per month on average in the final months of the last presidency. There were 10,000 a month before the pandemic. So far, this is according to the Washington Post, by the way, so these are public numbers. So far in this administration, ICE officers have made about 2,500 arrests during the Biden presidency. Now, that's a dramatic drop in difference. It sounds to me like what's being prioritized is not the husbanding of resources. What's being prioritized is not arresting criminals and not arresting people who are here illegally. What I'd like to get from you is a commitment that you will vigorously enforce our laws that are on the books and will make ICE's mission to do so a priority. Can you give me that commitment?
Yes, sir. I am familiar with the article to me, the one data point, in my experience, I would like to see more data to see what other factors may have played into that to better understand the numbers. It is concerning. So I would make sure, then again, that if we're being strategic and we're prioritizing properly, that we could go after those individuals that pose the greatest threat to our communities. I think that's reasonable and appropriate, but we would be aggressive in going after them.
Let me ask you this. Do you agree with ICE's current policy of requiring ICE officers to receive pre-approval from senior leadership before they make a lawful arrest?
I think that under the priorities that are listed, they do not require any kind of approvals. I think it's laid out that they could still use their own discretion on those. And others, it doesn't preclude them from taking action, but they would have to work in concert with the regional directors, the field directors, to make sure that it falls in accordance with the priorities and that they've looked at other criteria.
Well, with due respect, I mean, working in coordination with before you take action sounds like pre-approval to me. I mean, do deputies in the Harris County Sheriff's Office need pre-approval from you before making lawful arrests?
No, sir.
This is my last question, Mr. Chairman. Just let's give an example here. It's my understanding that these restrictions on ICE enforcement removal operations, particularly the pre-approval requirement, is having a significant impact in the field. I've learned that in one instance, ICE officers requested permission to place a detainer on a subject who's been deported 4 times previously, has convictions of evading arrest, escape, domestic violence, and multiple DUIs. This detainer request was denied by ICE senior leadership. This seems crazy to me. The whole procedure seems crazy to me. Does this seem like a reasonable way to proceed to you?
Senator, in my opinion, hearing that, it doesn't seem reasonable. If confirmed, I would want to understand better about that case and to understand why the local field directors made the decision to perhaps not pursue enforcement action. So I would like to better understand, and I understand your concern.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm over my time. I'll just say in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, that I appreciate your answer, Sheriff. I think they do put you in significant tension with this administration's policies. I'm personally fine with that. I hope that you'll go and enforce the law vigorously. I don't know what the White House will think of your answers, but I'm heartened by what I've heard so far. I'll probably have some additional questions for you for the record. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. The chair recognizes Senator Carper for your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Mr. Santos for his willingness to share, serving the role of Director of U.S. Census Bureau, and your willingness of Sheriff Gonzalez to serve as the head of ICE. And I have I've asked a lot of yes or no questions, gentlemen, but I'm going to ask about 3 of them of Sheriff Gonzalez today to start this off. And if you'll just basically give me a yes or no answer, I would appreciate that. At the direction of Secretary Mayorkas, ICE is prioritizing, I think, as you know, for folks who pose a threat to public safety for enforcement. Do these priorities take away from ICE's ability to arrest anyone who enters the country unlawfully? Just a yes or no.
No.
All right, second question, do you believe that local jurisdictions should cooperate with ICE when it comes to apprehending criminals who pose a threat to our public safety or national security? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
And lastly, do you believe that ICE should be abolished?
No.
All right, you're 3 for 3. Let me talk a little bit about root causes. As my colleagues in this committee know, I'm a big root cause guy. I believe that until we address the crime, corruption, the lack of economic opportunity that drives folks in Central America and Northern Triangle and other places, unless we address those drivers to make the journey north, we're going to continue to see migrants arriving legally or illegally at our borders 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Sheriff Gonzalez, I'm pleased to hear that you are also a root cause guy, just like me. And like a number of my colleagues, I'm also pleased to hear that you are a collaborator by nature, because the importance of collaboration cannot be overstated when it comes to advancing the mission of ICE, an agency that's been lacking a Senate-confirmed director for over, listen to this, 4 years. That being said, if confirmed, how will you work with your DHS and law enforcement counterparts in addressing root causes relevant to the mission and work of agents at ICE? Please.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. As you mentioned, I'm a collaborator by nature. I've learned to expand coordination and collaboration in my roles both on Houston City Council as Mayor Pro Tem, working a diverse group of agencies, as well now as the Harris County Sheriff, both on the law enforcement side, when we're making sure that we're being strategic in our enforcement, that we're protecting our region from harm, as well as developing continuums of care when it comes to dealing with vulnerable populations that have been incarcerated, that are grappling with addiction, mental illness, and other things. I've been able to work very collaboratively with many to do that. I would work closely with the ICE workforce that has that experience in those relationships. I would make sure that I'm working with our sister agencies to make sure that we're fulfilling the mission of protecting our homeland and keeping the integrity of our maintaining the integrity of our border. So I would make sure that we continue to work with those relationships. I do it now working with HSI, with the U.S. Marshal's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, with ICE, with many others. I believe in coordination. I think it's important to fulfilling the mission of ICE, and I would be very committed to continuing that.
Good. Thanks, thanks so much. Let me change gears and ask a question of Mr. Santos, who's been nominated to be Census Director. Now, Mr. Santos, in I think it was June of 2021, the General Accountability Office, affectionately known as GAO, published a report that found planned innovations implemented during the 2020 census helped the Census Bureau optimize operations and slow the trend of increasingly costly decennial counts. At the same time, the report made 3 recommendations for improving the way the Census Bureau tracks and measures the benefits and cost savings attributable to specific innovation areas. Mr. Santos, can you please take a moment to share how you might work with GAO and their Controller General, Gene Dodaro, to implement open recommendations and other lessons learned from the 2020 census as the Bureau begins to prepare for the 2030 count? Go right ahead.
Thank you, Senator. I believe it's important to work with GAO. I believe they are an ally to the Census Bureau in terms of informing them on cost efficiencies and other types of strategies that can be used in terms of creating a more effective and efficient census operation. I also believe that GAO represents one of a number of stakeholders that can and should be consulted in order to get their ideas, their innovations that they offer in order to consider for the upcoming 2030 census. I understand that, and I would feel, if confirmed, that as director, there is an obligation to carefully consider and respond to GAO suggestions on innovation and other types of activities like this. I know that the Census Bureau has, as I've said before, an incredibly talented staff, career staff, and they have been working on innovations. I expect to, if confirmed, work with them to understand the direction that they are currently taking with regard to innovations, and the GAO response will be part of that.
Okay, great. Thanks, thanks very much for that response. Question back for Sheriff Gonzalez. Sheriff Gonzalez, can you take this with respect to leadership? I like to say that leadership's single most important ingredient in the success of almost any kind of organization on our planet. Absolutely critical in government and federal government especially. Sheriff Gonzalez, could you take a moment to share with us how your nearly 2 decades of experience in law enforcement has prepared you to take on the role of ICE Director after years of vacancies at that agency?
Thank you, Senator. I'm very proud of my background. I've worked extremely hard. I'm a very hard worker. I have a strong work ethic. My heart's in the right place. I'm an effective, proven leader that's been able to effectively lead and manage large workforces. I've been able to dismantle drug and crime networks. I've personally worked complex investigations where I've had to go and tell a mother that their son or daughter was killed as a result of gun violence. I've led and oversaw our law enforcement response in our county to an unprecedented event when it was up to her with regards to Hurricane Harvey. I've been battle tested. I've been on the ground. I know how to lead at a high level and effectively lead a large workforce. I've also never forgotten the importance of those frontline team members are out there doing the heavy lifting each day. So I know how to lead. I know how to be effective. I'm a good listener. I'm a good collaborator. I'm a good steward of taxpayers' resources. I've done it effectively leading a large budget of over $570 million in my years as sheriff, and helping have a hand with the city's budget of nearly $5 billion as well. So I've been proven an effective leader. I'm battle tested. I know how to get done. I also understand when it comes to law enforcement that we could be firm on crime, we could be firm on enforcement, but we don't have to lose our compassion and humanity as well. So I try to be a leader that approaches things from a thoughtful manner that looks for results.
Great comments. Thank you for those, and thanks again for your willingness to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carper. Ranking Member Portman, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for allowing me to defer so some of my colleagues could get their questions in. Ohio, Mr. Santos, is working on redistricting, as you know, incredibly important. I mean, there are people who are thinking of running for office, but they don't know what the districts look like because we can't get the data from the Census Bureau. And it's been a disaster in Ohio, and I'm sure other states feel the same. We have a commission now, and that commission has a deadline of maps being due for the legislative districts on September 1st, and then congressional districts, the maps and plans are due on September 30th. And with no other options, I supported Attorney General Yost's lawsuit against the Census Bureau to get the data, because without the data, we can't draw the lines. And again, literally, people don't know what districts to run in. Constituents don't know what district they're going to be in. And the lawsuit ended up with the Bureau agreeing to provide this data by August 16th. Now, remember, I said September 1st is a deadline, so August 16th is not much time to put together the plan, and that date cannot slip. Can I ask you today, if you are confirmed, will you commit today to ensuring that that deadline is met, that we have no further delay in getting the Census Bureau data?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I very much sympathize with the concerns of the state of Ohio in advancing democracy with redistricting. I understand the urgency. I also understand the importance of having accurate information in order to make the critical decisions that drive our democracy. I also understand the timeliness. Timeliness is an element of data quality that it has only relatively recently been recognized as something that's crucial and that we need to take into account when we're developing data products. So I am with you in terms of wanting to produce data by the dates that have been committed to. I have full confidence in the Census Bureau, the career staff, the excellent data processors.
Mr. Santos, so let me cut to the chase, if I could, with apologies for interrupting you. I agree with everything you said, but I need a commitment. Will you commit to meeting the August 16th date? That's what I'm asking. Yes or no?
I will commit to trying to meet it as much as possible. I do not have the information right now to know where the Census Bureau is.
Well, it's a court-ordered deadline, and if we don't have it, we can't do the redistricting. So I wish you would just commit today to adhering to this deadline. I mean, that's the least I think that you should be able to do as a nominee for a bureau that has not provided the data needed for us to, as you say, be sure our democracy can move forward by having redistricting on a timely basis. So I'm disappointed you can't commit to it, but I'll leave it there unless you'd like to commit to it. August 16th, that's all I'm asking.
I am confident that the Census Bureau will produce it by August 16th.
But you won't make a commitment to getting it done.
I do not have the information to make a commitment, and it would be irresponsible.
I've just given you the information, which is it's court-ordered, and the agreement is to do it on that date.
That is absolutely correct, and I totally understand that.
Okay. Sheriff Gonzalez, as you know, ICE has a longstanding principle to establish and maintain these partnerships with state and local law enforcement to bolster effectiveness in executing the ICE mission and our country's mission to ensure we are protected by ICE. One of these programs is called the 287G program, which allows trained local law enforcement to partner with ICE to cooperate on removing dangerous criminals from the United States. As Harris County Sheriff, why did you terminate the 287G agreement with ICE in 2017?
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. For me, I made a thoughtful decision. I considered a number of different factors. When I first began as county sheriff, I was inheriting a budget that was $8 million in arrears. So I had to look at the monetary component of how my resources were being utilized. I think an effective leader needs to look at their resource allocation. Two, that this was a voluntary program, so I was working in an amicable manner in coordination with the local ICE director to making sure what the impacts of my decision would be. And I had to consider, obviously, the local realities as well, and the importance of local law enforcement also working with a diverse immigrant community. I also wanted to make sure that we continue to remain focused on having the avenues necessary to arrest serious offenders in our community that impact our public safety. So ICE has always maintained a presence to this date inside our facility. We work in a coordinated manner when it comes to that. There's never been any issues. I've never declined a detainer.
So this concerns me on 287G. Would you, if confirmed, want to terminate the 287G program? You don't think it works well? You didn't want it in your own county? Would you want to terminate that program?
For me, it was a local decision.
I know my question is, would you want to terminate the program?
That would not be my intent.
You have made comments saying that you would like to terminate, you're proud to have terminated the agreement with ICE. You wish the Harris County Sheriff's Office didn't have to cooperate with ICE as mandated by Texas law, what you were talking about a minute ago. In response to a question about ICE officers being in Harris County Jail, you said, quote, ICE were there when I arrived. I ended the 287G program that I committed to do. We can get away from that. And then you said, I advocated against ICE before. I think it's unneeded, and I think it's a bad law with regard to the Texas law mandating cooperation with ICE. You said if ICE determined someone had previous history with it, then it's ICE's purview. I wish it wasn't like that, but it is. You know, I've talked about this, but I'm just concerned about a potential leader of ICE having these views about ICE and what the effect would be on the morale of the individuals. Do you stand by those statements today, or do you wish that ICE, the organization you were seeking to lead, would receive cooperation from local law enforcement?
Ranking Member Portman, thank you for the question. I do want to add a little bit of context in regards to those comments. That was with regards to a state law, and I believe in local control, and that was being mandated by the state legislature as a mandate on local law enforcement. And I felt that as a elected leader in my county, I best understand the reality on the ground, my area of responsibility, and the experience of working with local communities. And so my perspective on that issue was based, or my comments were focused on the mandate that it was being mandated by the state legislature on local law.
Sheriff, my time is expiring. I'm going to leave you with one question. Please, if you would get back to me on the record. We don't have time, unfortunately, to get into this in detail, but the arrest records, wonder what your view is on that. When the executive order was issued on inauguration day by President Biden saying no deportations for 100 days, no longer an emergency at the border, we saw a huge drop in ICE arrests. During the last administration, from October to January of 2020 to 2021, we had roughly 24,000. I've talked to you about this, and then the February to May numbers we have are about 10,000. It's about a 58% decrease with the same budget in ICE arrests. So if you can comment on that, are you concerned about that dramatic decrease in ICE arrests following the executive order, coupled with, you know, the worst half year we've had in 20 years in terms of unlawful crossings at the border? So I would appreciate a response in writing that, if you don't mind. And again, I appreciate your past service, and for both of you, thank you for your willingness to step forward.
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. Senator Hassan, you are recognized for your questions.
Thank you so much, Chair Peters and Ranking Member Portman. Thank you both for this hearing, and to both of our nominees, thank you, and thank your families for your willingness to serve. This is a team effort, and we appreciate you stepping forward very much. I have two questions for you, Sheriff, and then one question for you, Mr. Santos. To Sheriff Gonzalez, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement manages three operational components, including Homeland Security investigations. Homeland Security investigations is a critical component of ICE, responsible for vetting immigrants, as well as investigating transnational criminal and terrorist organizations, cyber crimes, the online and international exploitation of children, human trafficking, and transnational drug crimes. If confirmed, how will you ensure that the Homeland Security investigation's important missions, including its work fighting the substance misuse crisis, continues to be a priority?
Thank you, Senator. All those issues are critically important. If confirmed, I would work very closely with the personnel that's in place to understand that threat landscape and get updates on where we're at, and then trying to see how we could best lead a strategic and targeted response to all of these different challenges that you mentioned. HSI is the preeminent law enforcement agencies when it comes to being able to understand how cartels are utilizing the different migration paths, for example, and taking advantage of others. So want to see how we could dismantle those networks. That would be critically important. And then making sure we're working with our partner agencies in an effective manner to make sure that we're tackling all these various issues, including the issues, as you mentioned, like fentanyl, which is a concern in Harris County for me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, the influx of fentanyl is a critical issue for the entire country, and we're seeing, as you know, a huge increase in overdose deaths. So I would look forward to working with you on that as well. Sheriff, I'm going to follow up with something we talked about the other day. New Hampshire is home to a group of Indonesian immigrants who have lived in the United States for many years. Many came here fleeing from religious persecution. Many of them do not have green cards, some because they were given bad legal advice years ago. They are important members of our community at this point, people who have worked jobs, paid taxes, raised their families in New Hampshire. Under the Obama administration, as long as these individuals checked in with ICE authorities regularly and didn't commit any crimes, they were not a priority for detention or removal, and they were provided work permits. However, the previous administration attempted to deport many members of the community. If confirmed, will you commit to looking into this issue and working with my office to protect this community?
If confirmed, I look forward to working with you, Senator, on that issue. I think it speaks to some extent about the importance of having a prioritized response. That not every situation is the same, and that we need some guidance on this. And I think that that's where the prioritization and other factors that may be available would more than happy to work with you on that.
I appreciate that very much, and I look forward to doing that. To Mr. Santos, each Congress, the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, issues its high-risk list, which identifies and helps resolve weaknesses in critical federal programs that are at particular risk for mismanagement or waste of taxpayer dollars. One of the critical programs highlighted on this year's high-risk list is the decennial census, which provides, as we've all talked about, critical data to determine congressional representation and to inform the federal government about how best to allocate its resources. Despite the conclusion of the 2020 census just months ago, GAO already anticipates that the next decennial census will face management challenges such as meeting goals and deadlines for testing new data collection technology, recruiting and dispatching thousands of census workers, and evaluating the accuracy of the collected data in a timely way. If confirmed, sir, how will you work to mitigate these management challenges?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I will work with the Census Bureau staff who has been eagerly and earnestly planning the 2030 census. I understand but have not been briefed on the plans of further incorporating technology, leveraging the lessons learned from the 2020, which was an extraordinary census in almost any sense of the word because of the pandemic. And it was because it was also, the 2020 census was also the first fully digitized operation. There are a lot of quality indicators that can give clues about efficiencies that heretofore had not been available. So it's critical to take a look at those, to analyze those, and incorporate that. And I can, in my role as director, if confirmed, prioritize those particular areas of research so that we can reveal the nuggets of insights that allow us to create more effective operations.
Well, thank you for that. And what I would look forward to doing is staying in communication about the challenges that have been identified, what you believe you can glean from this research and new data, so that we can improve management, but also an ongoing conversation with Congress so that we are preparing to have as an effective and efficient next census as is possible.
Thank you. I would very much like to do that. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. Senator Scott has agreed to temporarily postpone his questions so that Senator Rosen can ask her questions, who I know has another meeting to get to right away. So, Senator Rosen, you are recognized.
Well, thank you, Senator Scott. I really appreciate that. I owe you one there. Thank you, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman. I also want to thank Sheriff Gonzalez and Mr. Santos for being here today. I really enjoyed speaking with both of you earlier this week. And I know that Senator Peters has brought this up, but I want to build on this a little bit. Sheriff Gonzalez, of course, I appreciated the chance to discuss how it's been increasingly challenging for ICE to recruit and retain qualified, responsible agents over the last few years. I know you agree that it's important to maintain high standards for ICE personnel and screen recruits appropriately during the hiring process to reduce the chance of corruption and misconduct, of course, which have plagued the agency in the past. You know, in Nevada last year, we saw a worst case scenario when reporting revealed that a core civic employee at the company's Southern Nevada Detention Center was actively participating in a neo-Nazi website, expressing interest in starting a white supremacist group as well. This is absolutely unacceptable, particularly for an agency that works disproportionately with the underrepresented minority and vulnerable undocumented communities. So going forward, how will you ensure that ICE properly screens for individuals who embrace white supremacy or frankly, other dangerous ideologies? And what are your plans to conduct a human capital needs assessment to identify those needed improvements in both recruiting and retention?
Thank you, Senator. I think obviously maintaining a workforce that has the highest integrity is always critical to make sure that we're maintaining public trust. This is something that I work with on a regular basis, leading a backgrounds and recruiting operation within the Harris County Sheriff's Office, as well as my previous work when we were trying to attract talent to the city of Houston in my role on city government. This is something that we're always working. In fact, I met recently with my team to see how we could do better with our screening protocols, making sure that we're onboarding the right leaders into our agency. I know across the board nationally that many law enforcement agencies are also grappling with this, not only the initial onboarding, but further check-ins throughout their career to make sure that things somehow aren't getting gone sideways in some way or no longer fit the mission of the agency when it comes to a team member's behavior. And so this is something that I would commit to understanding more and working with you to work with you through those concerns if confirmed to be the director.
Appreciate that. And I want to move on too to talk a little bit about your the ICE's contracting practices, because last year we all heard about a frankly shocking, and the criminal medical procedures performed on women without their consent at the Irwin County Detention Center in Georgia that LaSalle Corrections managed. So I was relieved to hear earlier this year that the Irwin County Detention Center would be closing. Of course, we've heard similar serious complaint about the health and safety of detainees at other facilities owned and operated by private companies. So if confirmed, what policy changes are you considering or would you consider regarding ICE's contracting practices, particularly in the realm of with respect to the health and safety practices for detainees.
Thank you, Senator. If confirmed, the health and safety of our facilities is paramount, not only for those that are under our care, but also for our workforce as well. So I understand the critical nature of it. I operate one of the largest jail systems. It comes with many challenges, so I'm quite attuned to those challenges and working with a team to work through those challenges. I also understand the complexity of working with a very detailed oversight body when it comes to the review and inspections of our jail facilities. I understand that under ICE, they own and operate directly 5 facilities, but there are other facilities that where there are contracts in place. In total, ICE operates with, I believe, 4 different sets of standards, so it's very complex operating and overseeing a system that big. So I would want to understand what oversight and safeguards are in place to make sure that there are certain standards that are being met. We had experience, or I had experience in this early on in times when we've had to outsource temporarily into other facilities, private facilities. It's a practice that generally I'm not in favor of. We're currently not outsourcing any inmates in our facility. So this is something that I would want to make sure, and that's sometimes my concern with private facility is understanding the oversight of that and making sure we're holding folks accountable to maintaining those high standards. So this is an area of concern. I've heard stories of some of the inhumane treatment, and that would not be in alignment with the vision that I would have for ICE if confirmed. So I would commit to make sure that we're reviewing that very closely, Senator.
Thank you. I want to quickly, in the minute I have left, to turn to Mr. Santos and talk a little bit about breaking down the language barriers. I mentioned before in this committee, I do applaud the Bureau for providing resources, materials, in 59 non-English languages, but the census questionnaire itself was only available in 12 non-English languages. It excluded a large number of our South and Southeast Asian languages spoken by our AAPI communities, not just in Nevada, but all across the country. My office has also heard that seniors and other underrepresented populations had trouble completing the census questionnaire due to a lack of broadband access and technological literacy. Which was really a particular problem because we did experience postal delays last year, and of course there were a lot of fears around that as well. So Mr. Santos, how are you going to address some of the broadband technological issues, the language issues? How do you intend to minimize those if confirmed?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. I believe that all voices need to be heard when it comes to a decennial census, as well as the massive survey programs and data collection programs, which are the other part of the census that Bureau that folks don't often recognize because they are incredibly important to our economy and understanding our people. In terms of getting to individuals of different languages, it's important to tailor designs. To tailor approaches, to understand the situations that people are in. Often it's not enough to simply translate a form and pass it on. There are issues of cultural relevance. What is the reading level of the populations that we're going after? Ultimately, it demands research so that we can take the various populations in the wonderfully diverse United States that we live in and tailor different approaches to different individuals to maximize their chance of participation. That includes not only translations, it includes outreach, it includes talking to stakeholders and getting their buy-in. It includes a whole variety, a large toolkit that need to work together in order to create the strategies and practices and protocols that
Thank you.
will achieve.
I see my time's expired. I just want to be mindful of Senator Scott, who was kind enough to yield to me. So we'll take the rest of the questions and answers off the record. Appreciate that. Thank you, Senator Scott. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Scott. All right. Thank you. First off, congratulations to both of you for your nominations and your willingness to serve. So my questions are for you, Sheriff. First off, thank you for, law enforcement is very important. As we talked about yesterday.
Yes.
One thing we talked about yesterday, could you talk a little bit about the importance of enforcing the law and complying with the law? And we talked a little bit about something I've been surprised at, which I think you probably will be a little bit, is at the federal level, and I don't know if it happens much at the county level, but people just decide what laws they're going to enforce and what laws they're not. And can you give me your thoughts on that?
Yes, sir. For me, I think it's important to respect the rule of law. It's been obviously my life's work from all my adult service in law enforcement. So it's something that to me is very fundamental. I know it's an important American ideal as well, just as our immigration system is as well. And I think it's one of America's great success stories, or immigration. But I think that it's also a paradox sometimes, because we also need to make sure we're maintaining the rule of law.
So you probably talked a lot about the border today. When I think about the border, I think about the little 14-year-old Nicaraguan boy that was left in the desert and, starting, the Utah, he's asking for help, just left for, guess to die. And then you saw the two little Ecuadorian girls, 3 and 5 years old, they just dropped, over the wall. You can't, you're just, you got kids and grandkids. Your heart goes out to these people. And so in your position as running ICE, is there anything that you will be able to do to try to make sure those things don't happen? Because it's disgusting for these little kids. You just can't. Your heart goes out to them.
Yes, thank you, Senator. You're right. I think that it's important, in my opinion, to always lead in a humane and compassionate way. That's something that, for me, would be very important. That we look at the systems that ICE operates, whether it be enforcement or whatever interactions we may have, to operate, again, within the rule of law, but also make sure that we're being respectful, that there is an asylum system to the extent where ICE can help deal with some of the backlogs as well, I think would be very important. To the extent where I could help bring some of my perspective of working with local diverse communities. My Houston region is one of the most diverse in the country. Making sure that we are implementing some semblance of looking at circumstances and being open to, like you said, the hardships that sometimes come with these situations as well.
So there's all these stories that ICE employees are not allowed to enforce the law. Do you believe that's true, or and what do you think about that?
I do not believe it's true. I would want to understand, if confirmed, how they're interpreting guidance. I think there's a lot of latitude at the field office, which I think is smart. I think that many of those decisions should be under the area of responsibility of local officials that better understand the threat landscape in the community, that have those partnerships. So I would want to understand, again, in my reviewing of the guidance that's been offered, I think that there's ample latitude for us to be effective and get the job done. It doesn't preclude anyone from being, obviously, a focus of enforcement if it meets the priority areas.
In all the different jobs you've had, have you ever had a situation where somebody you work for told you not to enforce the law?
In my experience, I haven't.
Yeah. How would you handle that? If somebody said, "Look, we know what the law is, but we really don't like that, so we want you in this new job not to enforce it," how would you handle that?
I understand that it's concerning. I know that in the past there's been priorities that have been given to ICE in the past and in previous ICE administrations as well. And my understanding is at the time they weren't universally popular. I think it's important to understand within the confines of our work, limited resources, making sure that we're being effective in our enforcement. And so I would want to also understand the quality of arrest, make sure, though, that we're listening to the ICE workforce. It's my understanding that that's what Secretary Mayorkas is doing now, is engaging with the ICE workforce and other sister agencies to make sure that he's getting a full understanding of concerns and other things. And I hope that that informs his thoughts on this matter.
So So your background is law enforcement. How important is it for local law enforcement to work with ICE? And what do you believe you're going to be able to create a relationship where law enforcement will want to work with ICE going forward?
Absolutely, yes, sir. I do see many possibilities. I think we could move forward in a positive direction. I've talked to many counterparts across the nation. I think it's important to understand some of the successes and also where we could do better. And if confirmed, I would want to see how we could be a better partner to fulfill the mission and making sure that I believe in working in coordination. I don't think one agency can work alone. We have to depend on others. And I think that it's important that there always be a good coordination, especially with local law enforcement for deconflicting purposes and other reasons as well to maintain our public safety.
So assuming you get confirmed and you're there for 2 years, what would you define success?
For me, if confirmed, I would welcome the opportunity and consider it an opportunity of lifetime to be able to work with the men and women of ICE. I would like to see where we've become a strategic agency, a preeminent law enforcement agency that works effectively, that is prioritized, because I think that it's a reality of managing. I would want to make sure that we're looking at more expansive data sets. I've heard some data that is often given, but I would like to see to make sure that we're leading an effective agency that is an enforcement agency that both respects the rule of law, that protects my North Star is always public safety. Did we keep our community safe when it comes to these issues? But two, did we create an agency that also engages with the community? Are we engaging with the community better? I think that the work of ICE can be hard to understand, and it's important for us to be engaging with the community. Those would be successes for me.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. My opportunity now to ask some questions before calling upon the next senator. My first is for Sheriff Gonzalez. Good morning. Under the Trump administration, there were reports of ICE agents falsely claiming to be police and concealing their true identities to persuade community members to open their doors and allow agents into their homes without judicial warrants. This was found to be a violation of the Fourth Amendment in a class action lawsuit brought last spring in California. In addition, ICE has used unmarked vehicles to pull over people in areas heavily used by farm workers, for example, to increase the number of community arrests, even though they are not authorized to stop people in this manner. So, Sheriff, as someone who's worked in local law enforcement, it's great perspective to bring here. Do you believe ICE officers impersonating local police officers helps or harms public safety? And as a follow-up question to that, what steps would you take, if confirmed, to ensure that ICE officers would not engage in such practices in the future?
Thank you, Senator. Well, first, I would want, if confirmed, I would come in to understand what the current protocols are. Obviously, I believe you said there was some maybe legal action that was taken on this matter, so obviously we would want to make sure we're working in accordance with the law. At the same time, I understand from my experience that sometimes we may have to take certain action depending on the individuals that we're having to take action on, where it may merit a different higher threshold in our response. But with that said, I think it always needs to be in the context of proportionality to make sure that we're not unnecessarily scaring communities, with the presence, and that there's not other mitigating factors that we have to consider. It's important that ICE does not work in a manner that in any way intentionally just seeks to terrorize communities or anything of the sort. I think it's important for us to be a professional agency that could take care of its done effectively. I want to make sure that the men and women of ICE that have to carry out these actions are safe, that the community is safe, and that we could do it in a lawful, orderly way as much as possible.
Right. No, and I appreciate that, and in particular as a follow-up to some of Senator Scott's questioning about the ability for ICE agents to enforce the law. Well, of course, but that's pretty broad. Again, as you can appreciate, you bring the important perspective of local law enforcement has their specific role to play. Federal law enforcement that is there to enforce federal laws plays a different role to play. In unique circumstances, there's some collaboration that may be justifiable or in order, but by and large, it's a very unique mission. And when federal agents are intentionally or otherwise misrepresenting themselves as local law enforcement, I think that does undermine more broader efforts by local law enforcement to build trust and rapport with community members and community leaders. So that's something that, if confirmed, I look forward to working with you to address. My next questions are for Mr. Santos. Much of the attention on the Census Bureau's work is on the decennial census, right? Especially this last year, given all the challenges to the 2020 decennial census. What is less known is that the Census Bureau also conducts a number of other surveys in between the decennial census, including the American Community Survey, known as the ACS, that relies on sampling and data modeling in the years between the decennial censuses. The ACS does ask more detailed questions, more questions and more detailed questions, and new data is released every year on the changing demographics of the United States, including information about housing, income levels, marital status, educational attainment levels, and so much more. This information, coupled with the decennial census, is especially important for local communities and government when crafting policy, making investments, allocating resources and services. Mr. Santos, how can we ensure that the sampling is robust enough so that it accurately represents especially smaller population areas in the United States where there may be a higher need for investments in education, infrastructure, social safety programs, et cetera?
Thank you very much for that question. The American Community Survey is a national treasure because it really does allow us to understand who we are as a nation in our rich diversity and our situation. And what basically, I guess not too many people know this, but the American Community Survey used to be part of the decennial census, but a subsample, so it was captured once a year. By moving it over to a continuous survey, not only do we get through sampling the information, the rich information that we were accustomed to under the decennial census model, but we get it contemporaneously, much more contemporaneously. We can track over time. As part of the design, the statistical sample design of the American Community Survey, there are oversamples, there are deliberate overrepresentations of rural areas, of small towns, etc., that are sprinkled throughout the decade so that we can capture that information accurately and reflect it for the benefit of the public.
Great. And one other question. Over the past few years, there's been significant debate about how the race and ethnicity questions is phrased on the census. Many experts claim that those of Hispanic origin are not accurately being counted due to their mixed race status. The census currently asks if an individual is of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. It then asks for the individual's race, which can be confusing to many Hispanics, who are often from mixed race and ethnic backgrounds. In 2015, the Census Bureau did its own test using a combined race and ethnicity question and found that more individuals identified as Hispanic. However, in order for this question to be put on the census, the Office of Management and Budget would have to change their standard categories. So, Mr. Santos, you've written about this topic and discussed the need for data collection methods to evolve and adapt to ensure everyone is fairly represented. Can you briefly, I know our time is up, but can you briefly tell us how you'll work with OMB to try to establish a combined race and ethnic question for the 2030 census?
Yes, I can fully commit to working with OMB on this to the extent that it's possible to use a single race ethnicity question. I would be in favor of that. The census director doesn't have the authority to include any specific questions. It has to abide by OMB. but I can use my own personal perspective as a Latino and use my research experience and my leadership position to work with OMB to make sure that the proper attention is given to that specific issue so that we can see whether or not we can incorporate it into the next decennium.
Thank
or
you.
even the American Community Survey.
Thank you. Senator Langford.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Mr. Santos, let me ask you a quick question. I have talked for several years to the Census leadership, and they have said every year how hard it is to be able to connect with every American once every 10 years. And I have reminded them there is an agency in the federal government that connects with almost every American every single year, and it's the IRS. The IRS gathers information in April every single year. The Census Bureau gathers information about Americans in April every 10 years. Can you help me understand why the two of them cannot work together once every 10 years? That on a tax form, that as you're submitting your tax information on that every 10-year time period, that the census information could not also be included. So when you turn in your taxes, you also complete your census information.
Thank you so much for that question, Senator. And I congratulate you on your long-term continuing efforts to create efficiencies or to find efficiencies like this that we could.
It's about an $8 billion difference, the best we can just determine.
Yes, absolutely. And I understand that. The good news is that the Census Bureau does cooperate with the IRS and even the Postal Service on the conduct of the 2020 census and has leveraged information and resources from both of those. As far as your particular idea, I think it is worthy of consideration, and if confirmed, I can discuss with the Census Bureau's.
Right. Let's sit and visit on that as a follow-up on it. Obviously, I know we're getting information to be able to clarify some addresses and other information and to fill information in. I'm talking about completing your form so that we're not having to chase as many people down at this point, and to be able to make it simpler for the American people that they don't have two different sets of information they need to complete, both from the federal government, both in April. It just makes sense to be able to put those two together, and so let's definitely follow up. There are some legislative issues I'm sure we'll have to be able to clarify. Let's work on those together. If we don't plan for it now, we'll have another $8 billion inefficiency 10 years from now that we can and should avoid on that. So thank you. I look forward to getting a chance to follow up on this. Sheriff Gonzalez, good to be able to see you again. Thanks for getting a chance to come by the office so we can get a chance to be able to visit. I know you've had multiple questions on this in the past. We also understand you are not currently at ICE, and we understand that. There are some policies that are currently happening at ICE that you are not responsible for, but you're walking into a situation. So let me ask just a couple of questions. Have you visited with the National ICE Council, any of the leadership there, or will you commit to get a chance to be able to sit and hear from them so you'll get feedback from the field of what's occurring?
Senator, I have not met with them. If confirmed, I would look forward to working with them.
Be great. Obviously, they can give you some face-to-face stories of what's actually happening in the field right now that I think would be very helpful. So I'm going to give you a situation and then tell you where our frustration is coming from. This is a story that came out. Person was arrested for sexual battery against a child. ICE officers requested permission of management to make an arrest, but management denied the officer's request, even though this was sexual battery against a child. Second story. This was a person that had been deported 2 times previously. Person had a pending local charge for distribution of heroin, 2 counts of aggravated assault, endangerment of a child, endangerment of an elder adult, failure to stop at a command of police. The person appeared at a designated location with a quarter pound of heroin and attempted to sell to an undercover police officer. Realized what was happening. He attempted to ram the police vehicle with his car and almost hit the undercover officer that he knew was an officer. That person had a woman and a baby in the backseat of their car during the heroin sale. ICE declined to lodge the detainer on that individual. As I've mentioned to you before, the current policy is they cannot make an arrest without reaching out to regional leadership. This was one of those situations where they requested of regional leadership and were denied the ability to be able to make those arrests in both those: sexual battery against a child, assault on a police officer, and distribution of heroin. What do you think about those? I know you haven't seen the full case on this, but those don't look hard and complicated to me why we shouldn't put a detainer there or start the process.
Senator, for me, those fact patterns are concerning to me. I can identify several serious public safety concerns. If confirmed, I would want to have more information on those particular cases, and then also understand from the local field directors, regional directors, on why those decisions were made not to pursue enforcement action. It seems to me that on those fact patterns that it would have been appropriate. I haven't seen anything in the guidance that would preclude that from happening, but again, I would want to understand more specifics about what happened and why.
So thank you for that. I would hope for that. In the past, ICE, when they've gone to be able to make an arrest of an individual, they were aware that it was a criminal alien, met the criteria there when they arrived. If they happened to be with 3 other people, 2 other people, 1 other person that was not legally present in the United States, those individuals were also detained as well. Should that be continued as a policy, or should it only be literally if you encounter 4 people that are in this place that are not legally present, you only actually detain the 1 person and the others you just ignore?
Senator, for me, again, I think it's a matter of prioritization. I think that with any agency that has limited resources, manpower, and other considerations, I think that it's appropriate to have priorities. I think we could always assess if those are effective. It doesn't preclude any of the others from still being potentially up for enforcement removal. But again, I think that I would trust that our personnel on the field could make those judgment decisions, look at the totality of circumstances, and see if it's a good use of resources, because it is a matter of trade-off. If we are pursuing multiple individuals in the scenario that you gave, then there's others that perhaps we're not focusing on. So I think that we should be strategic and smart in our enforcement effort.
I understand. Last May, because we've not been able to get from ICE the statistics for June, we have 6,000 ICE agents in the field, and they did 3,000 deportations in a month. It is a record low for them. So clearly, they're not overworked at this point. In fact, the ICE agents that we interact with are pretty frustrated, saying that they're the ones being handcuffed currently, not able to actually do law enforcement, or they're being told by regional leadership, no, that doesn't meet the standard. You need to stand down, even though you know this person has multiple DUIs, sexual battery of a child, assault on a police officer, whatever it may be. They're requesting to be able to go and actually interdict, and they're being told, no, they cannot do that. So the challenge is, obviously that sends a signal to people that are here that are not legally present that ICE is really not going to enforce the law. And as you mentioned earlier in your testimony, if someone is not legally present here, they're not legally present here. This has been part of the challenge to be able to say, who do we actually engage? So I'm not asking to go pursue and to go door to door through neighborhoods. I'm saying if an individual is found to not be legally present, they are a criminal alien that we are in pursuit of, and actually go interdict, they're also with another person that we's clearly not legally present. Do we ignore one and not pick up the other one? And pick up the other one?
Yes. Again, Senator, I think that it's important for us to be strategic and be thoughtful in our enforcement. I think it's important. I think at the end of the day, just making arbitrary decisions like that everyone that's often referred to as collateral poses a serious threat. I think we run the risk sometimes of perhaps taking someone that may be a business owner, that may be and I'm not saying that preclude, that they're hands off, but what I'm saying, I think it's a matter of looking at the totality of circumstances. I just believe that a prioritized approach is reasonable.
Sure, I understand a prioritized approach. I'm not talking about, again, doing massive sweeps. I'm just trying to figure out where this is going, because if again, we know someone is not following the law and we just ignore it, then we have a law that we're not applying at all. And that's obviously, what that does. That leads to more criminal activity as you go, and trying to be able to figure out how to be able to interdict that in the future. Okay, we'll continue to be able to do follow-up. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Well, Mr. Santos, Mr. Gonzalez, again, I'd like to congratulate you on your nomination for these incredibly important positions, and also to thank you for your willingness to take on these roles. These are both challenging roles, and we expect the men and women who serve in this capacity to do work for the entire country. So we appreciate your willingness to do that. For the record, both nominees have made financial disclosures and provided responses to biographical and pre-hearing questions submitted by this committee. Without objection, this information will be made part of the hearing record with the exception of the financial data, which is on file and available for public inspection in the committee offices. The hearing record will remain open till 12 p.m. tomorrow, July 16th, for the submission of statements and questions for the record. And with that, this hearing is now adjourned.